This is a video about NASCAR throwing the caution flag on the last lap of the race, specifically their inconsistency in doing so, following last lap crashes in Daytona's Duel race number 2, the Daytona 500, and both the Xfinity and Cup races at Atlanta. I'm telling you this because when I made my Richmond video last year, people were confused about what the hell I was talking about. So are we caught up now? Good. Here's the situation, in case you're new to this sport. It's 2 laps to go in a NASCAR race. The leaders are coming off turn 4 battling for the win. Everyone behind them is also battling for position. If anyone crashes or otherwise creates an unsafe track condition, one of 2 things is going to happen. Which one occurs depends entirely on 2 things. Number 1, the moment NASCAR brings out the caution, and number 2, if at that exact moment the leader has crossed the line and taken the white flag. If the leader hasn't reached the line, the race goes beyond its scheduled distance. We go into overtime, a green-white checkered finish. But if he has crossed the line, the race is over. The field is frozen at the moment of caution, and photos taken around the track at that moment will determine the final running order. I already did a video on green-white checkered finishes last year. In it, I pointed out the overlooked role of the freeze the field rule. Instituted in 2003, this rule prevents drivers from racing each other to the caution flag, a practice which was particularly dangerous if drivers had to speed past a wrecked car in order to reach the finish line. Drivers were further disincentivized from racing to the caution with the introduction of the lucky dog, which gave the first driver off the lead lap one of his laps back. Prior to that, lap drivers would often go to dangerous lengths to beat the leader to the caution flag. As I said, the problem with freezing the field is that it doesn't treat the last lap any different. On the surface, this may seem fine. A rule that applies on lap 1 should apply for lap 200. But as we saw from Fox's media onslaught for the last couple weeks, featuring last year's 3-wide photo finish at Atlanta, racing is entirely about the finish. A great finish can make fans forget an uncompetitive race, and it can also elevate a good race into the stuff of legends. I talked about this in another video. This is why the debate matters, because in today's NASCAR there is no greater threat to a great finish than a last lap accident, and with it the likelihood of a race finishing under caution. It makes no difference if drivers have cleared the accident scene, or if the leaders can safely reach the finish line. By the letter of the rules, the race is declared over the moment the caution falls, and the focus then turns to figuring out when exactly that moment occurred. We're talking about this now because already 4 NASCAR races in the first month of the season have seen a wreck occur on the final lap, and inconsistent officiating saw 2 finish under caution, the other 2 under green. To be fair to NASCAR, you can blame at least some of this on terrible luck. No one knows what's going to happen in a race, and the officials have to be quick and decisive in enforcing the rules. Sometimes they're going to get it right, other times they're going to make things worse. In Duel Race 2 in the Atlanta Cup race, last lap crashes caused NASCAR to throw the caution before the leaders could reach the finish line. Unfortunately, in both cases, when they did, the leaders were racing side by side for the win. In the Duel race, so close was Erik Jones to the finish line that he was first declared the winner before officials discovered the field was frozen with Austin Cindric in the lead. In between, NASCAR decided to not throw the caution when last lap wrecks occurred in the Daytona 500 and the Xfinity race at Atlanta, but those wrecks wiped out all but a few cars, and the leader at the moment the wreck started ended up cruising to an uncontested win. The calls weren't just inconsistent, they were snake-bit. When they threw the yellow, it ruined the finish. When they kept it green, it didn't matter. And now both sides of the debate over last lap cautions each have 2 clear examples to point at when they bitch at each other on Twitter. Now that we're having this debate again, I think it's worthwhile to remind ourselves what a caution even is. Strictly speaking, a caution is a warning to the drivers that an unsafe condition exists on the track, and because of this, the rest of the field must slow down immediately and cannot advance their position. Or it means the end of a stage. But that's it. Now let's think about this a little more. If it's the last lap and the wreck is happening off the final corner at the back of the pack, is a caution necessary? You may say that it is, but applying the rule to this case, what's the point of warning drivers in front of the accident? Especially if the leaders can safely make it to the finish line in a matter of seconds. This was at the very heart of the fans' frustration, particularly as the Duel Race 2, where the leaders were mere feet from the finish line when the caution fell. And Mark Martin was quick to point out, correctly, how NASCAR famously didn't throw the caution in the 2007 Daytona 500 when an even larger accident directly behind the first 2 cars occurred much further up the track. It may well be a valid argument that in some cases a green flag finish may be the common sense choice. But of course, throwing the caution for a last lap wreck and freezing the field is the safest option, and therefore it's the best option. There really isn't an argument against it. Believe me, I tried to come up with one for this video. The sooner the caution comes out to slow the field, the sooner rescue teams can attend to the drivers involved. After all, in those frantic moments when an accident unfolds, no one, including the officials, knows the condition of any driver involved in the wreck. Plus, as Ryan Ellis pointed out on Twitter, freezing the field prevents drivers behind the accident scene from racing through debris, taking spots away from drivers who either slowed or were blocked in by the wreck. And most critically, it reduces the chance of a secondary accident, where a driver wrecks, then is stranded in the middle of the track as the field bears down on him. Such a scenario killed Friday Hassler during the Twin 125s in 1972. Today, these cautions are anticlimactic and frustrating, and in many cases the drivers who caused said accident deserve to be criticized, especially if it just keeps happening, as it is right now. I also agree with the point made that the current format creates too much apprehension on the final lap, as the entire field knows the race could end at literally any moment, increasing the likelihood of bonehead moves. But until something better comes along, this is probably the best NASCAR can do. There is one caveat to this. Up to this point, I've discussed this debate as if it has two clear sides, and if NASCAR just picked one, we'd have consistent officiating. But that's actually impossible. What we're talking about is an entire spectrum of possible outcomes. And here's the inconvenient truth. Whether or not officials throw the caution and freeze the field on the last lap, that decision will always be subjective. It is to NASCAR what determining a catch is to football or a strike in baseball. There are parameters, but it's up to the officials to actually use those rules and make the call. Consider all the elements at play here. Keeping with the metaphor, say we widen the strike zone and throw the caution for any on-track incident on the final lap. What's the dividing line between a crash that brings out the yellow and just hard racing under green? Does the yellow fall at the moment a car breaks loose? Is it the moment smoke comes off the tires? Or is it when the car slides onto the apron? Or the moment it hits the wall? Does it need to be just one car? Or does it need to be two or three or more? Does the car need to slide back into traffic? The more of these questions you ask, the more time goes by, and the closer we get to just letting the race finish under green. And where is that tipping point? Is it if the leaders are on the backstretch? Is it if they're in the last corner? Is it when most of the field clears the wreck site? I could go on and on like this, show the same wreck to a whole group of people, and every one of them will give me a different answer. This is why the solution, once again, isn't adding more rules. Let me say that again. Let's not add more rules. Creating any more rules to govern this brief moment of a race will end up taking more time than finishing the race under green. There reaches a point where the officials simply can't do it all. We don't need lines, we don't need sectors, we don't need any of that. We just need some common sense. So what do you think, ladies and gentlemen? Let me know in the comments below. And again, thank you for watching.
In America, there exists a sport that is driven by the fans. They are why everyone works so hard, on the teams and at the tracks, in front of the grandstands and behind the scenes, to give the fans the greatest race possible. NASCAR fans deserve the best, starting from the high banks of Daytona, all the way to the shores of California, and at every race in between. NASCAR fans, you're the reason for our success. Thanks.